Welcome back to Nat1 Presents. With us today, Chris. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing well.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Nate, of course, is not here, which, of course, is a good thing because that means we get to cover some serious content again. And by serious, I mean we're going to talk Justice League, basically.
Yeah. Said we would do this before, and now we're getting to it.
Yeah, by the time this airs, it should only be 2 months. Probably just a couple weeks after the Snyder Cut actually aired. Snyder Cut. The Snyder Cut. Yeah, Nate's not here. I'd like to say he has a good reason, but he said, fuck it, I'm not doing this anymore. Goodbye forever.
Yeah. So he should be back next week.
Yeah, he'll be back next week. For sure. Chris, have you been listening to some of our episodes? And you joined us a little late. Did you end up going back and listening to some of our stuff?
Yeah, you've made fun of me for not listening to literally anything that you guys have made. So I went back and I listened to almost everything you've made.
Awesome. Once again, showing that peer pressure is the greatest, most effective way to get listeners of our show. I think many of our Patreon supporters can attest that if we did not berate them and badger them into becoming patrons, they probably wouldn't have done it, even though it's only $1.
Only $1.
Yes. And thankfully, Nate's not here, so we're only going to say it once this episode. Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah. If the joke comes up, low-hanging fruit, all that.
So, yep, without Nate, I think we are going to revisit another All Things. And today we will do All Things Justice League, which, if it's anything like All Things Pokemon, we had a lot to say and did not come anywhere close to even saying it.
No.
Believe it or not, I think Justice League might be a more narrow umbrella. Even though it has like more history than Pokemon, I think it probably has like just a more straightforward.
Yeah, it hasn't branched out into quite as many like different forms of media.
Absolutely. So, yep, today's episode will be that. I do want to give a quick shout out to all of our patrons. Just nobody new this week. Just want to say thank you for being a patron. By the time this episode airs, you should have seen our new bonus episode, a behind the scenes look at our creative process and our brainstorm into Nosferatu, another episode that probably should have aired by now. Probably. Of course, I say that, and then things in the schedule changes, and then this airs in January 2034, and nobody knows what we're talking about.
Wow, 2034, you want this to really
go.
This
is it. I'm putting all my eggs in one basket. They're rotten and they smell like shit, but
hey, man.
So
just color them a funny color and just like, hey,
right?
Perfectly good.
That's crazy. Actually, we talked about not talking about timely stuff so that it was evergreen, but Easter's coming up on Sunday. What are your thoughts on Easter? Creepy man in a bunny suit, yes or no?
Definitely, because I'm pretty sure bunnies don't shit eggs, as far as I know. But yeah, I've never really understood Easter all that well. It has never made sense. Like, why is a rabbit leaving eggs everywhere? What does that have to do with Jesus?
Absolutely. Super confused. And I always love, like, if you just look up like funny like Easter bunny photos, some of those like bunnies used to look like horrifying.
Oh yeah.
Like some of them aren't even smiling. Like, okay, yeah, maybe, obviously when we go back and like look back in time, there's definitely like older, like, you used to wear this kind of outfit. That's silly. You used to wear like fanny packs. Haha. But like the costumes for the Easter bunny back in the day just looked murderous.
Yeah, absolutely horrifying.
It was just like the eyes are angry and it's not happy.
It's like real funny to see like mall photographs of like kids sitting on like an Easter bunny's lap. And the kids are just crying.
Yeah,
it's like that's a somewhat modern thing, and this is horrifying, and you're like torturing that child, which is hilarious.
So you know me, Chris. I have an anecdote for just about everything, and so my mom at one point, or many points, I don't know, it's all kind of blurs together, but she was kind of like the photographer at the mall who took pictures of whoever was dressed up in a costume. Costume. Nate's not here, so I'm just upping the dramatics like 100%. Apparently. But yeah, she was a photographer, so I was there. Like sometimes, obviously, I got my like free photos. I don't know if they were free, but she got me in there a few times. But sometimes I was just there when she was working, and so I got to see many an Easter bunny, many a Santa. And that's the story. I don't know. I basically, I don't know.
Great.
I don't know. I spent a lot of time at the mall around people dressed in fictional, like holiday people costumes. Yeah. So if that doesn't explain a lot, I don't know what does.
Yeah, I don't know what that explains at all.
Yeah, okay.
Honestly.
I don't know. But I think we can all agree one thing about Easter, aside from, maybe if it's like the end of your fast or whatever. But I think the more exciting part is, for me, Easter was the holiday where sometimes we had a ham and like a turkey. Like we would do both.
Fancy.
What was like, did you do like an Easter meal? Was that like a thing for you guys?
Don't think so.
No.
I don't think we really did anything for Easter besides.
You're just like Italian and Irish, right? So
Yeah, for the most part.
it was like pasta and corned beef, and you probably didn't eat corned beef.
No, not very often. Okay. That was more like St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
And that was kind of it. Easter was more just, here's a bag of candy. All right, that's it.
Nice. Yeah. I guess chocolate became a thing too. Like,
yeah.
Like, or marshmallow, right? The like, what were those things called?
Oh, Peeps.
Peeps.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I never gave a crap about Peeps until
crap.
I like that I'm pretending to censor as if we don't swear on the show all the time, but I never cared at all about Peeps unless it was Easter. Then Peeps was cool.
Yeah. I mean, Peeps are all right.
Peeps are all right.
Marshmallow covered in sugar that now that I'm old kind of hurts to eat. Hurts my teeth.
God, this is a really horrible segment. So, speaking of things that were all right, let's talk about the original. Let's go right into it. All things Justice League. We're going to start off discussing the Snyder Cut and specifically maybe how it differs from the theatrical version that was, 2017, 2016, 2017?
Yeah, around then.
I'm going to say like 2017. That's the number in my head.
Yeah, it's in the before time when we could go outside, so it's hard to remember any time
before
period.
The COVID nation came. And, so yeah, I think speaking of my transition here was Peeps, not so great. Theatrical version, original version of Justice League, also not so great.
Yeah, not the best.
Yeah, so probably a consensus, but let's just, for those who maybe, let's go back in a time machine, 2017, we just get out of the movie theater. What were your thoughts right after seeing Justice League in 2017?
I think we saw it together, and I do believe the general consensus was meh.
Yeah, meh.
It's like, I went into this, I really wanted to enjoy it, and I wasn't super disappointed, but I also didn't enjoy myself that much.
Yeah, I wasn't like projectile vomiting after the movie. But the two takeaways I remember having was, or like maybe three. One was, this is boring.
Yep.
Two was, this was a movie about looking for three boxes.
Yep.
And then three was and I talked to you about this again with the Snyder Cut, though it was an improvement, the forced humor. I just remember there being a lot of punchlines that I'm like, I know I'm supposed to laugh right now, and I am not doing so.
Yeah.
Those were my takeaways. So not amazing. I don't know if I would say the movie was atrocious, but it was just meh. I was just pretty underwhelmed.
Yeah, for sure. Tonally, it was kind of all over the place. You could definitely tell that, Joss Whedon had come in and tried to bring like some Marvel stuff into it, like that kind of comedy. It didn't land super well, like that in comparison to the movie like chronologically that came before this, Superman vs. Batman or Dawn of Justice.
Dawn of Justice, yeah.
Very different, and the characters were all strange, and it all just felt very disingenuous to the characters that were built up.
Yeah, I agree. You and I share this opinion that DC, there's not a lot in the cinematic universes right now. Marvel has been kicking DC's ass for a long time.
Yep.
But we think, or at least I personally feel, and I think you agree, is that DC has this like dark tone that, when done correctly, is cool. Like it is what makes it more of its own thing, less of an imitation of Marvel, and more of like, hey, this has also been around for a long time, and if you like this kind of slice of it, this could be for you. And it was just like the movie, the Justice League, when it came out in 2017, didn't feel like it captured that. It almost reminded me like it was trying to do what Thor Ragnarok did, where like Chris Hemsworth tried to like be really funny as Thor, and it kind of worked for Marvelous. Man, I'm just like turning into Sheila like as we speak.
Apparently.
Crazy.
Do you have any Rubens today?
just 7. But yeah, so I just felt like you said that the tone was just kind of off. So what happened now? I mean, I didn't even know back then. I'm not a cinephile. I'm not afraid of movies, nor am I super excited about them.
Both statements are true.
I don't think I even really knew too much about like the director change or whatnot. So can you tell our viewers or listeners a little bit about what why did Joss Whedon why was he brought on to the original Justice League? What happened? Because that is a part of the story to tell how we got the Snyder Cut and why it was different.
So Zack Snyder, original director, his daughter passed away, we'll say. Yeah. And he and his wife, who was, I think she was the DP. I forget exactly.
Yeah, she was involved on the project as well.
Yeah, they're usually involved together when they're doing stuff. So they had to step away from the thing to deal, to grieve for their daughter. And so they had to find someone new. Joss Whedon, I think he did the first Avenger movie. Yeah. Don't know if he did the second one, but involved in Marvel and directing their movies. Their movies were successful. So Warner Brothers was probably just like, you do superhero movies, so come fill in for this. We already have a bunch of stuff already filmed. And then it just all got changed.
Yeah. And he was like, great, let's take out all the parts where women are empowered and let's go ahead and make it a lot cheesier. And ass shots. Want more of those too. Mm-hmm. Now, that joke actually ended up to be kind of ish sort of true.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about it a little bit more. So, all right. So then cut to, I don't know what year. Was it like a year ago? Was it 2 years ago that people were like, I mean, pretty much after the movie came out, people right away said like, hey, this isn't a lot of footage that was filmed wasn't viewed. You would have loved to have seen what Snyder would have done.
Yeah, for sure. But I think things definitely like about a year ago picked up steam for like release the Snyder Cut.
It did not happen. I don't know the exact timeline, but it was a year or two passed before like the Warner Brothers maybe got in talks of like, okay, people want to see it. And that's so unique, right? Like when is a movie it wasn't remade, but they definitely redid some shots and most of it
picked everything up off of the cutting room floor and put it together and the original idea.
Unheard of. Like movies don't get made twice in general.
Honestly, I think everything that's happened with COVID and all of that is probably the biggest thing that has led to that. They've needed more stuff to like put out. People really want this. So they're just like, all right, here's money. Go get all of this together, get everything edited, and then we'll put it out on a streaming platform now that that's becoming the new thing.
Exactly. I think COVID had pretty much the biggest hand in, it's not a good time. It wasn't, especially like peak COVID, we don't want to be filming movies right now.
Yep.
So revising something where they had a bunch of footage they didn't use is actually like a good call. HBO Max is fairly recent in the last year or two. I forgot when it launched. I want to say like a year and a half ago or something.
Yeah.
But HBO Max is fairly new. So they needed they're still trying to draw in some big original content to get people on the platform. So I think COVID, HBO Max, those factors decided to align in Snyder's favor, and thankfully that happened because we can go into what our thoughts were, but in general, critical review, at least of like average people like you and me and the listener, is good. Snyder Cut is better, and I don't know so go ahead, give me what were your thoughts on
I think overall, in comparison between the two, the Snyder version of it, very long, but I was never really pulled out of it or like made aware of the fact that I was watching a 4-hour movie.
Yeah.
I think like well-paced, nothing can really be cut out wholesale from this version versus the theatrical one that there was a lot of stuff that I don't think needed to be in there or was like just real cringy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think overall, much better product.
Yeah, I agree. So a few things here, right? So I think the original Justice League 2.5 hours, something to that effect. This was 4 hours. They tried to divide it into like 6 chapters. Yep. To me, I don't know if I would watch this in 6 separate parts. I guess it could be divided. Well, what's challenging is we can't talk about this movie like it's the first time we saw it because it wasn't. And for almost everybody, it wasn't. And that's interesting because, right, so when you said, okay, you didn't feel too much like it was 4 hours, I pretty much agree with that. Yep. You were with me. You saw there was one chapter I struggled with particularly.
Yeah, a very slow part.
It was just a slower part. And the thing was, I had seen this movie before. I'm going to go ahead, and if I was evaluating this movie as if I had never seen it before, I would say it actually flowed pretty well for a 4-hour movie. I think had I never seen it before, I would have been very okay with it being 4 hours, actually. I did end up ultimately struggling though because I had seen it before, and one part that I felt was particularly unchanged, or I just remembered very well, that was the part when I was like almost getting groggy from like eating dinner recently and stuff. So I was getting a little sleepy. But yeah, so 2.5 hours to 4 hours was a huge change. Now we're just talking about like very base, like what changed. But another major change, like when you turn the screen on, is the aspect ratio. Right.
It's 4:3 this time instead of, I think they go with like 21 by something for like theatrical cuts of things.
Yeah, basically, you know, it's that whole, like, if you imagine your old tube television, it was kind of recorded in that.
It was exactly that.
Yeah. And interesting, again, I think just like the 4 hour thing, I really did not notice, right? So now we had these like bars on the left and right of the side of the television because our TVs are all really in that newer format. I can be totally honest and don't really remember or notice the difference.
Same. I don't know if that's because we had like CRT TVs and we like started on those, so we're kind of used to watching things in a square.
It's not totally novel.
But honestly, I like didn't even notice them.
Didn't bat an eye. I totally would say I forgot.
Yeah, like at the very beginning, I noticed that they were there, but then once like stuff started happening, just they completely like disappeared for me.
So as far as why the change happened, like why is it in 4:3? I actually looked it up because I was pretty curious, right? Like they put a little disclaimer at the start of the movie, and basically they say it is intentional, which is like obviously they didn't forget.
This
right?
is what Zack Snyder wanted it to look like.
But I did a little bit more research, like why did Zack Snyder want it that way? And the answer was not at all what I expected. No. I guess when Dawn of Justice, the Batman versus Superman movie, came out, they were, putting it out more and more in IMAX screens. And in IMAX, it's actually more of like a giant square versus widescreen. And so basically, Dawn of Justice had both. It did have like a small 4:3 scene, but for the most part, it was in the widescreen. And when it was 4:3, it like filled the whole screen and looked great. When it was widescreen, it didn't use up the top and bottoms of the IMAX screen. And I guess that just left between experimenting with like new lenses and new like filming techniques, and then like that whole going to IMAX and just seeing the screen not being utilized, that actually convinced him that he wanted to do this movie in 4:3. So that's
the whole thing that way.
Kind of crazy. Not at all what I would have expected the answer to be.
I was totally expecting like some artsy fartsy fucking bullshit, but nope, it turns out no, it just looks better when it fills the whole screen.
I thought it basically was going to be something to the effects of like, well, combat scenes actually like show, like it's better if you can show more verticality, some super technical thing. Some cinemaphile, whatever.
Cinemaphobe.
Yes, making up words. Nope. So that was the reason. So those are like right off the bat, those are two logistically things you'll notice is they added an hour and a half to the movie and they changed the aspect ratio. Huge difference. But then they used a lot of Zack's unused clips, and then some of the clips might have been reshot again. I would say that it felt very natural. Like you could tell that these were originally filmed with the movie, or if they did film new scenes, like I really had trouble noticing.
It was never super jarring. Like all of a sudden we're like 2 years later and they're recording this with the people again.
Did you notice any? I can tell you honestly, I did not notice a single scene that was not without like someone would have to tell me.
No, not a little bit. The only thing I can think of would maybe be they had to redo some of the stuff with Steppenwolf, obviously, because different shape for the character, had a completely different design this time around. And that would really be it. I mean, every other one, never was I like, that looks different, or that person looks like they're a lot older now.
Yeah, it I don't know, the show, the movie, whatever you want to call it, the series, it almost felt like, but it was effective. I think if this was like a social experiment of like, can you remake a movie with the same footage and with different choices, yes, I would say it was successful. But let's talk a little bit more now, because I think there's a couple different, like you talked about Steppenwolf, like some characters had dramatic changes. A lot of times there were small edits that made other characters viewed in different lights. We'll try not to. We're not going to go too much into plot. There is like kind of plot changes for sure. But not really till the end, I would say. But
Yeah.
if you're wondering if like, obviously we're kind of telling you it's kind of good, but if you're like, hey, should I go watch Snyder Cut? The answer is yes.
Yeah,
right.
for sure.
Go check it out. We won't spoil anything too much plot wise, but we are going to talk about how some scenes, especially from the original movie, changed that made the movie better.
And I think
none of them should be spoilers.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, we're going to be talking about stuff that's like easily within the first hour of the movie anyway. That's only 25% of the movie. So
Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, so what you go first, Chris? What character is it mainly Steppenwolf? I know you wanted to basically some characters I think are better represented for better or for worse. And
yeah,
what were your
so
things?
Steppenwolf, the like main antagonist, still for the most part the main antagonist for the Snyder Cut, was the main antagonist for the theatrical cut. Completely different. Looks a lot different now. Still has the horns, but like is not like a skinny weirdo this time. It's like much like bulkier and makes more sense for like a character that their main weapon is just a big two-handed axe.
Yeah.
So visually makes sense with like what he's doing, and they actually made him into a character this time. He's not like super flat, one-dimensional like early comic book days villain where it's like this is the crime that they're doing and that's it. This time it was he had a bit of a backstory. He did something. There was repercussions for that, and he's trying to atone in some way.
Yeah.
To fix what he did.
Yeah. And basically, like, this isn't even in the original cut, like, this was still the case, but he is like a harbinger of, like, basically, like, Darkseid's coming.
Yep.
When that happens, he's taking over the planet for Darkseid. And so in the other movie, you just know that Darkseid's some awful thing that's coming, some awful guy. Whereas in this movie, there's like a little bit more like you understand why Darkseid is so bad. Like, again, there's repercussions for Steppenwolf, and it definitely makes him more fleshed out as a character. It also makes Darkseid more of like his ominous thing. Like,
In comparison to like how Marvel did it, when you heard about Thanos, if you didn't know anything about him, it's you just watch this whole movie and then you hear like the person behind the scenes is this and doing all of the orchestrating all of these things that are happening, and you get like a feeling of like they are on this like super high pedestal. And I think the Snyder Cut does that well for like trying to put Darkseid up on a pedestal of like orchestrating all this stuff, has just this huge force that he's using to like take over worlds and stuff.
I would say there's like two comparisons right? So there's the example you gave where like you see Thanos at the end briefly, they flash him and he's on like, you get this impression like, oh, this guy is on a whole nother level.
Yep.
So there's that, and that's a good example. Then there's a bad example I could give you of the second Fantastic Four from many years ago, where basically what's that guy's name? The Galactus is like a scary cloud thing, right?
Yeah.
So something like that where he's nebulous, he's not like tangible. Therefore, how can you really he's literally supposed to be a gigantic thing that eats planets, but instead he was like a weird cloud monster, and that made him less interesting. And so I think in the original cut, I think Darkseid was almost a little more like the nebulous cloud monster, because you don't really know much about him. You barely see him. Maybe there's like an outlined stick figure. He's referenced, but not much.
I think he's referenced, and the only thing that's like a direct reference, I think, is in the like apocalypse looking area where they have the Omega symbol, which is the symbol of Darkseid in DC.
Yeah. And then in Snyder Cut, you actually you see Darkseid. He has moment. He actually has scenes, some just small ones.
Yeah.
And it made him feel more like the Thanos level badass. That's like pulling the strings, but not necessarily the core villain. So I think that was done a lot better. Yeah. Steppenwolf was a lot less weird. I don't know. Like, I just felt like in the first movie, I think it's some of the lines he gives.
Also the voice acting was different too, which I think helped.
Yeah. So many of the changes are subtle that it was very hard for me. I spent a lot of time thinking about after the movie, like, what changed? Why do I like it more? Why? It's like, in many ways, I'm like, it's the same movie, but longer, but it's not. But so many of the I think that's the skill of editing and like literally saying a line differently with just a different tone, or using just a couple different words, literally one or two different words, really changes a lot. And that's what we see. That kind of feeds into my next thing, which was, so first of all, I'll talk a little bit. I don't know. Again, I told you I didn't know much about directors or Josh Whedon versus Zack Snyder, but as current events are right now, Joss Whedon, not everyone's favorite person. The more kind of we hear about like, yeah, he's always been hard to work with. And then the more it turns out like, actually some of it's even like kind of more maybe
misogynistic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So some questionable. And watching the first movie, I thought everybody was just way lame. But after watching the second movie and then reading an article by Business Insider where they showed scenes side by side, wow. A lot of scenes are changed drastically, and a lot of scenes specifically that like probably it's across the board for all characters. But like I know Cyborg got much more airtime, a better story. So it's like minorities in general did better. But what really stood out to me was the scenes for Wonder Woman. Like a lot of them put her in a much more professional, like good.
Wonder Woman and the Amazons much better represented this time around.
There's so many. So I'm gonna give. I mean, that article had like literally like 20 examples, and some of them are like huge. Like the really obvious one that like even you remembered from originally is that there's a scene where she's like coming to talk to Batman, and they just like they're shooting from behind her,
going up, staring at her ass the entire time.
Like her ass is in the foreground, and then Batman's just kind of in the background. That same scene is now just shot with like from above, like her shoulder, like.
No, this time it's from Batman's side, so looking directly at her.
Exactly. Like just made, like what was that scene necessary? Did the ass really make that scene like that, like add anything? No, it didn't. Another scene is when she breaks into the Batcave and he says, I spent millions of dollars on this. And she basically
they added one line in the Snyder cut.
And basically the line changes it so that instead of her saying like, yeah, I broke it. It was I disabled it.
Yeah, like, it was, I think, it looked expensive.
Yes.
And then they added in the Snyder cut, it took me almost a minute to disable it.
So much, instead of just like Amazon, like, crushed, brute. Yeah, it made her like, oh, she's an intellectual. And that makes sense. She's hundreds of years old and whatnot. So there's just so many scenes, and I can go on and on. The bank robbery scene, there's multiple scenes where basically the guy says like, I can't believe it. And they change it from like
that one I don't quite remember what it was.
They change it to believe it, and basically, and she also flies and throws the bomb up in the air versus just like throws it and like hides. I don't know. There's a number of them. A couple more though. There was a scene where the Flash in the original cut fall. I think it's intentional or accidental. It's supposed to be comic relief, but he falls on Wonder Woman who's lying down and lands in her bosom. So it turns out Gal Gadot refused to do that scene originally, and her stunt double actually filmed it. They just took that scene out. So there was just a lot of that, like none of that was necessary, and it all pays off. I will not spoil the ending, but they absolutely did her justice way better at the end of the movie. And she has, in my opinion, the most badass part. Well, her and Flash tied, but Flash I'd expected, hers I did not. And she had a really badass moment that was like pretty bomb. Great way to end the movie.
A good way for her to like kind of tie her whole character together, which makes sense for who she is.
Absolutely. So anyway, long story short, Snyder Cut did justice to Wonder Woman. But one more scene, it wasn't just Wonder Woman. We talked about like Cyborg getting more time, like minorities.
Yep.
And then there was even like Lois Lane. There's a great example of in the Snyder Cut, she's doing puff pieces. And then she's I'm happy doing puff pieces.
Theatrical cut, she's doing puff pieces.
Theatrical cut, she's doing puff pieces. And then in the Snyder Cut, she's actually just like, she's taking time off of work because she's grieving. Yeah. So, and that's implied in the theatrical cut, but in the theatrical cut, it's more like
someone has made
like
the
they're
decision
taking
for
mercy
her.
on her because she's a woman and she's grieving, whereas she's like, I'm not ready right now. So it's just like a more mature way to handle that. So yeah, across the board, I think like things are just handled so much better. Again, the intro scene with the Amazons, there's some cheesy line about fear in the theatrical cut. I don't remember the original line, but like
show me your fear.
Show me your
something
fear.
Like that.
Yeah. And then in the Snyder cut, that Queen of the Amazons turns around and is like, Amazon, show me your fear. And then they all scream, we have no fear. Which I'm pretty sure was actually just a stab at how cheesy the line was in the original movie. Things like that. There's a part where when they're trying to escape that like room with the box in the beginning of the theatrical cut,
Hippolyta.
Yeah. She, as she's running away, Steppenwolf says, yes, run. He's like taunting her. And it's like the Amazons aren't even giving him any trouble. In the Snyder cut, he's like being overcome by women and screams, no, as she like runs away. And then like the women who are like breaking down the wooden beams are like they just look kind of sexy in the first movie, but in the Snyder cut, they're actually like more like jacked. Like you see that they're actually more built because that makes more sense. So it just did justice. To,
I remember at the end when we were watching that scene, it felt completely different than the first one, but just like watching it, couldn't really tell why. Like in the moment, I couldn't remember like, why does this feel so different? This seems like it's, point A to point B, pretty much the same thing as happened in the theatrical cut, but totally different outcome for like how I felt about it.
In general, I would say the stakes feel more real. Like the characters are more respectable. And so when there are sacrifices either way, they feel they have more weight to them because the stakes are more real. Because when you treat someone seriously and then there is loss, then that's more impactful than a character not mattering and something stupid happening, you know? So, all right, let's see. We talked quite a lot about it. Let's just talk about that end scene that we all were pretty excited about in the epilogue.
Yep. So this will be spoilers for that. Yeah. We've like avoided it for the most part.
That's true. This is not really at all directly related to the main plot.
This is an epilogue. If you've seen the first one, it's an expansion on the like kind of apocalyptic state of the world that you saw for a little bit. That has moved to the epilogue this time.
Yeah, so basically Batman once again has this kind of like it turns out he's like asleep. It's like another nightmare he has, but it's like this vision of the future, and it's like kind of this Mad Max kind of apocalyptic universe or whatever. And one thing I know was just that this is the only time where Joker appears.
Yes.
And I know there was a goal that Snyder, this was one of the new scenes that they recorded, that they just wanted to bring
Jared Leto.
They wanted to bring Jared Leto's Joker into a scene with Ben Affleck as Batman. And so they recorded, they wanted specifically to have this scene, and then I'm not sure what other goals there were. It does almost feel like they wanted to try to set up more opportunities for the future.
Try and bring it back.
Yeah. There, as of right now, there is no more plans. Yep. Zack Snyder said he's done with, and vice versa. Warner Brothers has no more plans to pursue Snyderverse, but we'll see. Who would have thought a movie would have been remade? So we'll see. But I think that scene has a couple different goals. One was just to like give us something that we really wanted, which was the Batman Joker interaction, and then two, to maybe set up the future. So what were if you want to talk about, you can. We're gonna spoil it if you are on. So just skip like 3 minutes ahead, or whatever. But what happens in that scene, and then what did you think of it?
All right. So scene picks up with Batman, I think, waking up from having a nightmare of some kind. He starts heading out with, he has Deathstroke, Mira, and Joker, I think, are the people that he's traveling with.
There was some other speedster, I feel like. I don't think it was.
Flash was also there, but he had a mustache.
Oh, that was Flash? I literally just thought it was a different person.
No. And Cyborg was also there.
Okay.
They were like covered up. So they're walking across the desert. I think they're coming up to the ruins of an abandoned city. And they're like kind of afraid of something. And it's like revealed that, it's Superman. Superman has turned evil in some way. If you follow DC stuff, you kind of know that has happened before, where Superman has been on Darkseid's side at some point for one reason or another. But they're traveling across that. And they're arguing, and they're all very clearly tired from traveling, and they're talking and arguing, and then Joker and Batman start getting into it. And I think you might remember the line, the one that Joker gives Batman, like, how many worlds have you destroyed or something like that?
So all right, so spoiler, some of the Justice League heroes are dead in this like post-apocalyptic universe, and Mira kind of turns to Batman. She's like, what would you know of losing someone you love? And up to this point you see everybody else but not Joker. You don't know Joker's with them. And then it kind of like turns to Joker, who's laughing, and he's basically like, oh, Batman's lost people. And then basically implies he killed some of them, like, in the comics we know he killed one of the Robins. He killed his parents are dead. We don't know if that Joker killed his parents, but whatever. But basically, like, that Joker knows that Batman has lost people, but then he goes on this whole monologue, like cutting monologue of like, Batman lost people because he sent a boy to do a man's job. And also basically he says a really good line too about how many universes are totally like fucked up because you refuse to die, Batman.
Yeah.
And, which I thought was a really great line and
Oh, yeah.
kind of true to that character. But it's a really great monologue, and then Batman has some zingers too. Like you can tell, like this is a Batman who's like shaken in faith and his beliefs, and he says some things that you're like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
So really, really good. You know, it's just the whole scene is kind of like them talking about this post-apocalyptic future, and then the kind of it's really meant for that interaction between Batman and Joker. In my opinion, it wasn't quite as much as I wanted, but it definitely was better than some dumb scene of just like the Joker like in the background or something. Like
it could have easily been like a really stupid throwaway thing, but I think this was like super good, like kind of jumping off point of if they wanted to do something with that. That scene had like a lot of tension, and you could feel it with how everyone was acting. It had like Joker wasn't in it for very long. He more or less just had a few lines and then his monologue, but like could tell exactly who it was. Nothing like the Jared Leto that was in Suicide Squad at all.
For the better.
I think just overall, I think that scene was really interesting.
It's basically like there's an uneasy truce between the two, and honestly between everybody. Everybody's kind of pushed to a breaking point there. So I would love to see that movie. I love that kind of like those, you know, the Flashpoint type universes where things go wrong and characters are not, you know, what they thought they were. I don't think we'll ever see it unless things change. I'm guessing it won't. I'm thinking,
who knows?
My guess is Zack Snyder only returned to that because literally the footage was there and the story needed to be told how it originally was meant to be. But obviously there's some tragedy around that story too, and that probably he won't want to revisit that project.
Won't want to do that. WB has not been kind to like Ray Fisher. And there's like all kinds of allegations for that. I have no idea where things stand with that, but
good Lord,
doesn't seem happy with that. It just seems like the whole shoot was just plagued with issue after issue.
Yeah, a lot of people just want to move on from that, and I almost can't blame them.
No, not really.
Okay, so anything else you want to see from the Snyderverse? Like, is it gonna? Like I said, we know it probably we won't see any more. But if it did, amuse us for a sec. What would you love to see more of?
Deathstroke was set up in this movie. I'd love to see more of that. Joe Manganiello? Is that how you say his name?
I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but yes.
But him as Deathstroke.
He plays Dungeons and Dragons, by the way.
Yeah. I think that would be super cool to see. Like, having a live action Deathstroke movie with someone that's like big and imposing to begin with, I think would be great. I think it would be a great fit, and he seems like he enjoys it. I think as of today, I think like he's for like restore the Snyderverse like on Twitter and stuff like that. So a lot of people are kind of jumping on it, but
he would be great because he's more of like he's a comic book character that makes sense in my opinion. He's like an assassin who has reasons. It's like how I would break him down to, and I think he would be very interesting, like his conflict with Batman and just in general and the Justice League universe. It could be pretty cool. Probably won't see it, but I would dig it. I would say Snyderverse corrected a lot of things that was wrong, and that his vision could have worked.
Oh yeah.
Will we see it? Probably not. But
no.
Okay, so this is an all things Justice League, and so what we'll talk about now is the history. I want to talk a little bit about the history of Justice League, and then one thing we'll also talk about today is that DC does beat, in my opinion, Marvel when it comes to animated movies, and there are a number of animated movies, and a number of them relate to Justice League. So, so let's go through that. So, Justice League history. I had to hop on a computer and do a little bit more, right? So, right off the bat, I could think of kind of if I were to tell you what my history of Justice League was, there was like multiple cartoons I watched. That were Justice League, but of course, knowing all of this stems from a comic book at some point, I was like, how far back does it really go? And so I'll kind of give like a quick rundown for our viewers, you know, kind of what I dug up of like where Justice League has evolved over time, and then we can kind of reminisce about the series that we remember. So it goes back all the way to 1940. 1940 is when the Justice Society of America first makes its appearance. It's in the comic book. I think it's just All Star Comics. And so they appear there. Then again, it does so as Justice League of America in 1960, 20 years later in The Brave and the Bold. Then finally in 1967, that's when it makes its first animated appearance. And that's on the Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure.
Yeah,
which
sounds super great.
sounds super gay and might be our next D Hunter session, honestly. I could see Nate being super into that one.
Mm-hmm.
So that was 1967. Okay, and then this is where I start to... We're children of the 90s, you and I, and Nate as well. But in 1973 is when Super Friends comes out.
Yep.
Super Friends is as far back as I... So those episodes still aired well into the 90s. It's kind of that Hanna-Barbera, Scooby-Doo type era. And so that was kind of Justice League, but with some teenagers doing goofy things.
Yeah.
And it had crossovers. It had like animated versions of like the 1970s, 60s Batman with Adam West and stuff. Like characters in that were usually like spin-offs of the characters like in the shows around that time. So Super Friends was like, I don't know, I just remember like Cartoon Network used to play a lot of that old Hanna-Barbera stuff.
In the early morning when they did Boomerang before it spun off into its own channel.
That was the saddest time for me. I loved when they were together. The young and the old together combined. The young learning from the old. Anyway, so there was that lasted 13 years, which is kind of crazy. In an age of Netflix where they're like, we only film a show for three or four seasons because it's not...
You get one season.
Yeah.
Okay, we're done with you.
It's just how it's their original content model is just to keep making new stuff and not spend more than a couple seasons because it gets too expensive. Is supposedly what I've read. But in an age of that, 13 years of an animated show is pretty crazy. So I remember that those reruns played in. But then, of course, my favorite and my quintessential, if I think of Justice League, is the 2000s Justice League. So there's an animated one. It's kind of the same Batman from Batman animated series. So it kind of it's that Batman rolling off it. There is continuity between that and the animated show. And that lasted 2 seasons. And then there's another 3 seasons where they just called it Justice League Unlimited. And it was kind of like the Oprah, like you get a seat in the Justice League. You get a seat.
You get a pass. You get a pass. You get a pass.
And I mean, in the comic books, that's usually what happens, right? I mean, even if we look at Marvel Avengers, there's new blood.
There's so many Avenger teams.
Yeah, they keep funneling in new people. So, and then that brings us to in their like the 2010s is when we started to see these live action versions of the members of the Justice League. So it has a pretty long history. I kind of want to go back and see that 1967 Superman, Aquaman, an Hour of Adventure version of the Justice League. But
that's a super interesting pairing too.
Yes. It's tended to have the same people. It looks like Justice Society of America had more members, but all of the Justice League ones is almost always like the same 7 or 8 members.
Yeah, there's definitely a core set of Justice League people.
And you told me an interesting story about why Batman is like why they were kind of bundled together. And can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So originally, with the comic books, people would come out. It would usually be they try to push people individually, and then if that character doesn't really work out, they kind of fall back and start pairing them up with people that are more popular to keep selling comic books and potentially get people interested in that character so they can split off again and go do their own thing. So the Justice League, initially, I think, that was headed by Batman, Martian Manhunter. I think those were the 2 that like really stuck around. That just had a bunch of people that could not sell comics on their own. So they bundled them together into the Justice League of America, and they put that out. I think the person that I remember the most is Guy Gardner, because there's a big Guy Gardner following. People love him or hate him. And then I think like Dr. Fate was in there. He's a weirdo, wears a gold helmet.
Yeah, so in Justice Society of America, it had like Dr. Fate and a lot of those other people.
Yeah.
Justice League seemed to consolidate into mostly Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Martian Manhunter, Green Lantern. Green Lantern's one of those that you had just mentioned that kind of needed
a Green Lantern.
That's a good point.
Because I think Hal Jordan sold comics on his own, but Guy Gardner could not.
Got it. Who else are we? Flash
was in there.
Is typically an Aquaman is usually in there as well. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting. And so like Batman for so long has been so steady as like you can rely on Batman to sell.
Yeah, we're just gonna throw a bunch of people on your back and you're gonna carry it, no problem.
But then it's funny because like he carries it by basically not trusting them and always having like the self-destruct button.
Being just a huge asshole.
And in the 2000 series, he actually quits. He tries to quit the series, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Not the series, but the Justice League.
I think what that was a reference to Tower of Babel, which is the one where Batman betrays the Justice League, but it's people hack into Batman's computer, gets his files for how to stop any of the other Justice League members if they potentially go rogue.
Yeah.
So that's what that was. I think. I don't quite remember the episode as well, but I imagine it's off of that because it's a super famous comic book.
That makes sense. It's just very classic quintessential Batman. You know, like always has a backup plan, you know.
Oh yeah.
And like mistrust is like he's not
Yeah,
one
that's his
to
thing.
he has a backup plan because he assumes everybody is and even himself, I think too. He has
files on
against him.
himself.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so I wanted to talk one more thing on in our All Things episode of Justice League is the DC animated films. And this isn't just Justice League, but listen, if you are not watching, if you like DC stuff, but you're like, wow, I just wish I was as good as Marvel, watch the DC animated movies.
Yeah.
There's a really nice, it's actually sometimes hard to like find them all conveniently in one place. But honestly, if you go onto Wikipedia, or I'll post it on our Patreon, only $1.
Yeah, you brought it up again.
There you go. Dang. There's a nice convenient list of like basically what me and Chris do when we hang out sometimes is I pull up that Wikipedia article of like DC animated movies in the order they came out because they're never well publicized for some reason.
Not at all.
And then we watch them in order they come out. And so there's multiple Justice League, there's multiple Teen Titans. They have continuities. Usually some of them are separate, but some of them are one-offs, but then some of them are following this like certain continuity. And they're fantastic. And
For the most part.
yeah, there's some, sure. But like if you look at like sheer number, the percentage is high.
Oh, yeah.
I'd say like 4 out of 5 of them are, or 3 out of 5 are generally very good.
I think when you and I are watching Justice League movie or just watching DC movies together, either it's a really good movie and we're both into it, or it's not so great and we just heckle the shit out of it, which makes
Gotham
it better.
by Gaslight, I think, is that
Yeah.
one wasn't even that bad, but it was just so weird that I couldn't help.
It was just fun to make fun of.
Absolutely. Yeah. Chris and I definitely like, we're kind of, sometimes when we watch movies, it's very much a mystery science theater if they were assholes, like more assholes.
Yeah.
Like sometimes we just like really get into it. But yeah, I would say the average DC animated movie is really good. You know, I don't know. I can't even name Marvel animated movies, even though they exist probably.
Yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head.
And Justice League comes up multiple times. So if you're really digging Justice League, and we have a couple examples for you. For me, it's Justice League Darks. There's 2 of them that I know of, and then there's more Constantine stuff. Constantine is what makes it dark, I guess.
Yeah.
They also have some like, do you remember some of the other characters? Like who's that guy that's like a warlock or like?
So there's Etrigan.
Etrigan,
Etrigan is the demon tied to Jason Blood, I think is what his name is. There's Zatanna.
Yep.
More or less what Justice League Dark is the magical side of DC. I think that's Vertigo Comics is technically under DC, but they go by Vertigo and they're kind of all on their own.
Swamp Thing's in there too, and he's part of the dark stuff, but is he part of Vertigo or is he somewhere?
Yeah, I think he's also part of the same thing.
So it's those characters, but they're pretty good, honestly. I like the Justice League Dark because Chris and I were talking about this just a little while ago, and like Constantine we grew up in New England, right? Everybody's a little bit more formal, a little bit more reluctant, a little bit more irritable.
Yeah.
Like they're all hate their job, but they're all pretty good at it, and like that's kind of like who we feel we are and who we feel Constantine kind of is. So we're very relatable.
Who would have thought that the guy from England that we as New Englanders are just like, yeah, you're just like us.
That would make perfect sense. So yeah, Justice League Dark follows like him. Usually it's kind of like he's reluctantly helping the Justice League is usually how those episodes go. And then there's more magic involved, a little bit more like demons and darkness.
Yep.
They're really well done. I wish we could see more of those in like a live action.
They're definitely very different. And usually these go along with Constantine is usually the main guy in the like dark part of it, but it's usually Batman that also ends up going along with it. He's usually like your vehicle from like one side to the other.
Yeah.
So it's always great to see. I also like, Deadman, the very clear ripoff of Daredevil. His suit is exactly the same, looks exactly the same, but he's just a ghost.
Oh, I don't remember that.
No?
No.
He's just a ghost, and like I think in the first Justice League Dark, he like tries to take over Batman, and Batman just fights him out of him.
Oh,
he's just like, no one's ever done that before.
That's awesome. I'll have to go back and rewatch some good ones. What other ones aside from the Justice League Dark would you recommend? Because there's tons of them.
I think one of our favorites for sure is Flashpoint. Flashpoint was just so good. It covers into like more mature stuff in like the universe that splits off into it. And I think that sets like a really good tone for a lot of the DC animated films.
Yeah. Again, right, we're seeing this theme of like when DC embraces some of the dark stuff, like apocalyptic futures, or you know, like the dark heroes. Like that's when that's when DC tends to excel and differ from Marvel. And so Justice League Dark does that. Flashpoint again by showing us this kind of like universe where things didn't go so well.
Yep.
I think those are perfect examples. Man, I was gonna say something about Flashpoint. Oh. So I don't know if this is a good comparison, but for me, Flashpoint is almost it's not a direct comparison, but Flashpoint is kind of the Into the Spider-Verse of the DC. Like I almost feel like as far as Marvel animated movies go, Into the Spider-Verse is amazing, and it just shows like the versatility of potentially like some of the heroes in the series. And I think Flashpoint's kind of the same of like, here's a different version of what you come to see 1,000 times, and it's impactful when they take the time to do that thoughtfully.
Yeah, Spider-Verse definitely took like a very different approach to just everything.
Yeah, tone-wise is very different. I'm not saying it's not as unique per se as Spider-Verse was, like in terms of the animation or anything like that, but in terms of like it just showing that like these universes have many different like perspectives, or different even timelines at times, and I think that's a good thing to show because we have seen some of these characters time and time again, and so that's I would say Flashpoint is like a top animated movie you should see if you care about DC films. You haven't.
If you are not sure about watching any of them, watch that one first. That one will give you a good idea of like, this one is a really solid one. This is like probably the best one, I would say, of all of the animated DC stuff. I think it's probably the top.
There's a lot of good DC stuff, but I like, of the animated movies, I like just a lot of the different ones that show different sides. There's a couple that's just like the Teen Titans doing Teen Titan things, or the Justice League doing Justice League things. Yeah. Like, or the formation of the Justice League. Again, those are cool too. I enjoyed them pretty much every time. I think they're well done. But in terms of like being unique spins or
new stuff.
Yeah. Check out like the Justice League Dark. Check out Flashpoint. And there's more. I can't think of all of them because we've watched so many along the way, but I would check it out.
Yeah.
Ooh, we covered a lot.
Oh yeah,
a lot today. I mean, we could talk about each one of the members of Justice League in great detail, kind of like Pokemon. But hopefully we did a better job of containing it, because talking about all of Pokemon was ambitious to say the least.
Yeah, we thought we wouldn't be able to fill the time, and then we got to almost none of what we wanted to.
We sure did. So if you're listening, let us know. Have you seen Justice League Dark? Have you what is your favorite? What makes DC? Is DC better than Marvel? Do we have fans out there that love DC more than Marvel? Like, tell us if you exist. We're believers.
Yeah.
If you do, let us know. If you have a favorite Justice League member, let us know as well. And that is it for the most part. I did want to say thank you to Autumn for these kick-ass mugs we got. We got some D&D themed mugs. Drinking out of that. Hilarious.
Yep. Very difficult.
Very difficult. I will just burst into laughter the next time Chris drinks out of it in the middle of a session. But if you're listening, thank you again for listening to our show. Thank you for being a patron. I'm going to make a couple of requests. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, leave a review. You're already in the app. So just go ahead and just scroll down to the review part and actually write us something. It doesn't even have to be great. Just be like, wow, these guys are guys on a podcast.
I make wind.
Yeah. If you're listening on Overcast, that is an iOS specific app. So go ahead and jump into Apple iPod or podcast just real quick to leave us a review, and then go back on your merry way. You only have to do it once ever, and then you'll be back in Overcast for the rest of your life. Help leave us reviews. It helps us share. It helps us get recognized more by different indexes and bureaus and whatnot. So
please help promote our shit, please.
Please, good Lord. If more than 6 of you could listen. No, I'm just kidding. We're starting to get actual numbers each month. Become a patron if you'd like. If you enjoy the show, it is only $1. But I might raise the price. No, I won't. I won't do that. We're not going to do that.
I might wait until it's about to charge you and then just jack up the price.
No, supporting the show will help us buy better equipment. Hopefully, just better hopefully we're looking into newer cameras, better software, or if you just like listening to us, it just helps make our hobby something we can actually do,
Make sure it's not as big of a money pit.
Absolutely. Because it absolutely is. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Yeah. See you later.